Well, hello, everyone. My name is Coral Evans. I'm the former mayor of the city of Flagstaff, Arizona. I am joined here today with Mayor Call Sheehy, and he is with Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Hello, Mayor.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited that you are here today to have this conversation with us, Mayor. I have known you for a while, but would you mind maybe sharing some of your background, your history of how you became mayor of Lake Havasu City? Because I think that goes very nicely into this conversation that we're going to have about statesmanship.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm a longtime Lake Havasu City resident. My grandparents moved to Lake Havasu City in the late 70s. And when my mom was looking for a warmer place to go, Lake Havasu City is certainly warm. And so we moved out here in my sophomore year of high school. And so I graduated high school here in Lake Havasu City and just have always been involved in the community, either through my work at the high school or different clubs I was involved with. I then attended the local community college, Mojave Community College, and kind of was involved in the community that way. And I started working at London Bridge Resort, which is a hotel that's right on the base of the Colorado River and the base of the London Bridge. When I was in high school, and I started at the London Bridge Resort as a housekeeper, and kind of through that organization, they always want to give back to the community, and we're always involved in different aspects of the community. And it just was natural of a pathway for me to get involved at the civic level. And so I ran for council, and I was a council member for one term from 2014 to 2018. And then I ran for mayor in 2018, and I'm just finishing my first term as mayor, and I'm running for a second term as mayor during this election cycle.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I was really hoping that you were going to cover that, because one of the things that I just really so admire about you is the fact that you started out at the London Bridge Resort in housekeeping. And you just flat out say, hey, this is where I started out in this organization. And now you're the general manager, aren't you?
Yes.
And I just think that when you look at that and what is possible, especially when we talk about possibilities and opportunities here in the United States, I just think that that's one of those Cinderella stories, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, it is. But going through it, it seemed just very natural. So I started in housekeeping and worked bell service and front desk and reservations, and then I started getting into entry-level management. And before you know it, I was the general manager and have held that role for 18 years now. So it's been quite some time. But in this business, in the hotel business, I work with my team, and we make great things happen, not only at the resort, but I take that similar philosophy with me to my work in the mayor's office and work with our citizens and our city staff and stakeholders to make the community better than it already is today and better tomorrow based on the work that we're doing.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned citizens and, how your job at the resort, really dovetails into what you do as mayor and the concept of customer service. I know when I sat down with you and said, would you be willing to be on this podcast? One of the things I talked about is that through my dissertation work, I originally came into office as an activist. And one of the things I had originally wanted to write about was like a how-to for activists, a policy guide on how to do that. It was really when I became mayor of the city of Flagstaff and started looking at things, I guess, through a slightly different lens, that I realized that, there is a difference, at least in my mind, between an activist and a statesman. And I'm not saying that I'm a statesman in any way. But what I'm saying is that the expectations are different, right? And so I wonder if you can tell us, what do you think? What is the definition of an activist that you think? And do you think there is a difference in the roles of an activist versus the role of a politician versus the role of a statesman?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I have never really given it too much thought before you just posed the question, because it's something that we just do on a daily basis. And so I'm here to be of service to our citizens and do what's right for our community as a whole. When we talk about activists, again, from the lens of the mayor's office, they're generally one issue topics. And so, and being a former mayor, our day is not one issue at all. There's lots of issues that we're dealing with, and lots of issues that sometimes intertwine that might have even competing interests within those pathways to success for again, what's best for the community. So, activism is certainly important. I encourage all citizens that are engaged and passionate about, even if it is just one topic or one subject, get involved and make your voice heard. And that can be done very simply, especially at the local level. We have relationships with each other, and we know each other. When you send me an email or you call my office, you get me. You don't get anyone else that's doing it. And you can tell sometimes that the tone of an email or what an email looks like, that they don't think they're really going to get me, or that my eyeballs are going to be the ones that are reading it. And so I think that's important for folks to know, that they are getting to the decision maker or to their elected official. And in order for us to be able to carry forward, no matter what the issue is, and no matter what side of an issue any of us stand on, that we all start from a mutual level of respect, respect as human beings, and respect of what our passions are, so that we can have a good conversation about whatever it is that's on their mind. And again, that's either stakeholders or citizens or activists or policymakers. I mean, it really goes across the entire spectrum.
Do you think that there's a difference between activism and policy, or do you see within your role as mayor that there's a difference? You had mentioned that there's different sides to issues, right? And that when people come forward, maybe sometimes an activist mindset, it's a more narrow viewpoint, or it's one issue. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, no, that's they are different. And when you're coming in as from an activist standpoint, in my viewpoint, versus a policy standpoint, it sometimes is difficult to get past the filters that you might have put on yourself based on the definition of your activism. So whatever that scope was going to be based on what you put together yourself as an activist, or your group did, or an organization, whatever that might have looked like for you to get there, sometimes puts blinders on. And so folks only want what they believe is in the scope of what their activism is. But when it comes to policy impacts a community as a whole. And so we need to have a wider conversation about what that might look like, so that people understand that it's bigger than that. And when a policy is adopted or put into place, it can be in the form of law, where folks have to follow that. And so there's a lot of different sides that have to be discussed and focused on to ensure that the best public policy is put forward for the community as a whole, and not a narrow pathway that might be done through activism.
Yeah, I think that you really just hit it on the head there. One of the things I was looking back over my life, for lack of a better word, is that when I came into politics, when I came on the council, I came in as an activist fighting to save a building in a community. And there was a bond override that had happened at that time, and the city was looking for funding to, pay that off, and they identified this building to sell. And I really came in with that narrow mind of, I want to save this building. The community wants to save this building for this use as a community center. We actually saved the building before I was elected. It was right in the middle of the election cycle. And so when I ended up on council, it wasn't about let's save the building, because we'd already done that. Council had already said, we've identified a different pot of money. We're going to give this building to the community. And then I was there for a 4-year term. And I think that's what people maybe don't recognize is, for mayors, I'm not sure how it is in Lake Havasu, but it's a 2-year term, correct?
No, we are a 4-year term as well.
4-year term? Well,
yes.
In Flagstaff, a mayor is 2 years, but council's 4, right? And so if you come in with one issue, what do you do if that issue is solved before you're sworn in, or if you solve it within the first 30 days. There's so much more that you have to look at for your community. There's water issues, there's housing issues, there's police, safety, fire, and those types of things.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. One issue candidates, although passionate, sometimes can be a disservice to a community because there are so many different moving parts to a community. And as the citizens' needs change or pivot, they need leadership that's going to pivot with them and make those decisions that are vital to the direction that the community as a whole wants to go. And sometimes people will say, well, how do you know what direction the community wants to go? And we learn that through outreach and listening and understanding what certain neighborhoods or certain districts or certain areas of the community are asking for, or what they may need, or what they might not need. That sometimes people think that we always need to be doing something, where sometimes just doing nothing is what's best for that particular area of your community. But you learn that through listening and outreach at stakeholder meetings, council meetings, coffees, citizen engagement, those types of things. And you need someone that's willing to pivot. And that's not to say activists can't pivot or that they can't change course, but it can be a rude awakening when, as you said, you get on council and you solve your one issue in 30 days. And you're like, all right, 4 years is a long time to sit here and hold the seat if I'm not willing to expand my purview and my mind on how I can best serve my constituents within our community.
You said a couple things that I want to make sure that we go back and just kind of flesh that out. First of all, you talked about the impact, at least this is how I heard it, the impact that one issue candidates can have on the overall, I guess, democracy that a city could experience. And I think that's key. I know that when I was mayor, I had a council member who was at the podium, at the dais, and the council member said, I was elected for this issue, and that's where I'm going to be. And I was like, yeah, but we have an issue with water, housing, police, parks. We have all these other issues that I kind of need for you to care about as well. Also, we're not elected at large, or we're elected at large. So you're not in districts, right? So it's important that you have council members or colleagues that care about the overall picture, the totality of it. What do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. It's so important that elected officials and leaders can take a look at the whole. Certainly, there's pathways that people have more interest in than others, and so you may have elected officials or council members that really are passionate about roads and they have a good background knowledge about what that looks like. And you might have other council members that are passionate about making sure the roads are smooth and no potholes, but really don't know or really care about anything more. That doesn't mean that one's better than the other, as long as everyone can see the big picture of what, from a policy level, we can do to solve road issues throughout the community as a whole. And so it is so important that you engage with others in your community so you can expand those areas in which you might not have a natural curiosity or interest in, but yet you're still responsible for because you were fortunate enough to be elected by the citizens in your community.
Yeah. Let's talk about outreach, because you mentioned outreach, and I think that this is key too. But I want to just kind of dive a little bit deeper, because a lot of times people are like, hey, I sent you an email and you got 500 emails from 500 of us that want this. How many people live in Lake Havasu City?
According to our last census, it's a little over 57,000.
Okay, so one of the things that I think that we experience is you'll get a lot of emails on a topic, and maybe they are pro that topic or opposed to that topic, and people think, well, you got 500 emails, so this should be done this way. And then oftentimes, in looking at the totality of something, councils go a different way. And does that mean people were heard, or does that people were not heard? It's always that, oh, you didn't hear us because you didn't do what it is that we wanted you to do.
Yeah, that does come up quite a bit. That if one person sends an email, or even in your example, if 500 people reach out on a particular issue with the same frame of mind or same point of view, and the council does the opposite, that's just one segment of the community. And so I like to ensure a very transparent and open experience so that everyone has access to the same information, elected leaders, citizens, and stakeholders, so that we can all start from the same basic foundation that we can then build upon what the policy might be. Oftentimes in today's fast-paced world with different information flowing from different areas and different avenues, not all the information is factual. And so sometimes folks come forward in an engaging experience with not factual information. So we're not starting at the same spot. So I always like to ensure that we all have the same access to the documents, to the backstory, to the additional information. So then we can have the conversation at the council about what it is that is in the best interest of our community on the particular subject. So you have to always be listening, though. So and if we continue to listen, we'll always make the best decision for the community, again, as a whole. And that sometimes is difficult for some people that are really passionate about a particular topic when it doesn't go in their favor.
Yeah, I think that that's important to point out because, I think that engagement, I think it's important that we engage with people that we agree with and people that we don't agree with, right? A lot of times when people engage or they do outreach or they talk to someone, we tend to talk to people that we're maybe more aligned with or they're passionate about that as well. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we do that, when we don't decide to talk to the broader or to the people who are opposing something to understand why is it that they are opposing that. Is there some way to, and you use the word compromise, and people think that that's a bad word, but I think when you have 50,000 people living in a community or 80,000+ people in the community, you have to figure out what works best for the majority, and that does take a lot of compromise. What do you think about the concept of compromise?
Well, I think our whole system was built on compromise, and you'll hear me a lot to advocate for local control, and I do that because I believe the art of compromise is best done at the local level, where what's right for the citizens of Lake Havasu City might be different than what's best for the citizens of Flagstaff, and allow those communities to have their individual conversations about whatever the topic may be, so that they can do what is best. But the art of compromise is ensuring that everyone's viewpoint is heard and considered and included in the final package of whatever is going to move forward. And I think that can be done by engaging citizens on topics that are, one, important and are going to change the face of your community. And I think that it can be done, and it's been demonstrated, certainly in Lake Havasu City. We have a very engaged population. Our citizens, they come to our outreaches, they come to our coffees, they come to our council meetings, they telephone us and they email us, and they're very, very engaged in this community. And it can lead back to the early days when our city was founded by Robert McCulloch, and his pioneering spirit has really been instilled in all of us, where we know it's important to be a part of the decisions. And so we are part of that. And so as the mayor of Lake Havasu City, I don't really have to wonder, because my citizens tell me, they get involved, they show up, and they tell us what they want.
But I also think that's because you encourage that, right?
Oh, certainly. Yes.
If we're talking about the concept of statesmanship, and we're going to kind of head that way, but I think that's one of the attributes of a statesman, right? Is that you're trying, and I want to be clear for our viewers, and I didn't start out with this, but for me, I use the word statesman in a non-gendered way. Women can be statesmen just as well as men, And so that's why I just say statesman. And so I think that one of the attributes of a statesman is that you are listening and that you encourage feedback, even if it might be feedback or critiques that is not positive, right? Even if it's someone telling you, hey, you were totally blew this, you're not doing a good job, we don't like anything about it.
Yeah, no, that's so important. I mean, how are we going to make it better if we don't know what our citizens think about it? And so we have to engage at all levels, and certainly, hopefully, we are engaging early on so that we don't ever find ourselves in a position where people are like, "Oh man, that is so bad," and I don't know what you guys were thinking, but when I first got into elected office, I wanted to move government at the speed of business, if you will. And, it's a great phrase and it sounds really good. But I learned my lesson really, really quick that, government slows down on purpose so that we can engage citizens at each and every level and phase of a new policy. And so when we hear a topic or a policy, it's introduced in a meeting. And then in a future meeting is when council would take official action to either adopt it or not. And then throughout that gap, there's outside engagement and communications through outreach efforts to ensure that citizens' voices are heard. And that's important and it's valuable. And when done correctly, you can see good policy being adopted that's going to further the community as a whole.
I'm glad that you brought up, the concept of moving government at the speed of business, because we often hear that. We often hear that government should move quicker. If this was business or if this was the private sector, we would do X. And I'm not really sure that's the case, for lack of a better word. Most businesses, at least larger corporations, they answer to shareholders, right? And definitely, maybe they only have 25 shareholders, maybe they have 50, but they have a meeting, they hammer it out, and they move forward. Smaller mom and pops, it might be that you talk to yourself or you talk to your partner, but you have that meeting and then you move forward. I think that we should really look at what is the business of government. And the fact of the matter is that in your community, you have 50,000 shareholders, and those 50,000 shareholders have the right to know what's going on and to weigh in if they would like to weigh in. In Flagstaff, when I was mayor, we had approximately 80,000 people. And so I looked at it like our business is community, our business is city, and we have like 80,000 shareholders, some of which are under the age of 18. Some of which are unable to vote, for lack of a better word, because of, maybe their criminal background history or they're undocumented. And then some voted. Some did not vote for me as mayor at all, and others did. But you still represent the entire city. And so it's important that you listen to the entire city.
Yeah, no, it's so important. It's you have to always be listening to what is going on within your community and what your citizens are looking for and what they want from you. And, when it comes to moving business at the speed, or excuse me, the government at the speed of business, my takeaway from my conversations with our citizens here is to make sure that we're transparent and that we're quick and we're efficient. And so we still do all of those things. So if you're coming in to do business with us, so a business license or a building permit or a code enforcement issue or an encounter with our courts or otherwise, we're going to operate like a business efficiently, transparently, and we're going to get you what you need in an expedient way. But when it comes to changing policy, that's where we have to slow it down. So that we can again ensure that all of our citizens have a voice, if they so choose. It just allows them, if they choose to have a voice and get involved. We're here and we're ready to listen. There's certain things that just occur as matter of business that no one really has an opinion on or take issue with, and then there's other things that you have. Half the group is in support of it and half is opposed to it. So Again, each issue on its own. So we're here and we're ready to listen if our citizens so choose to engage on a particular topic that's on our agenda or going to come forward in the future.
Thank you for doing that nuance there, because I think that is an important nuance. Yes, cities do move stuff forward. Hey, the water, like you said, billing, plans, those types of things move forward quickly. But the underlying policy that helped put those in place probably took a little bit of time to help get established, right? So I do think that that's important to point, like the zoning codes and things like that, that then allow for that quick approval of an application to build something. So let's talk about, as we talk about the concept of statesmanship, right? We talked about advocacy and activists. Can you tell us, or do you have an example of something where you had, as mayor, it was divisive? There was something happening that was divisive in your community, and that you had to bring everybody together at the table. And what did that look like, and what did that take? And what was the result? And why did you think it was important to do that?
Well, yeah, anytime that you have something controversial or that you have a divided community or a divided council, it can get tense and it can be difficult. But if we stick with our same principles, that just ensure that everybody's voice is heard and that we take each person's perspective or understanding into consideration. Again, the whole of our community, for all of our citizens to move forward, then we're always going to come out with the right policy at the end. So during the process, though, it looks messy and it looks frightening to some and uncomfortable to others, and it is all of those things. But you have to say those. Each person has to say whatever it is that's on their mind or what citizens have or believe is going forward. And, we've had a few issues over the years that have been fairly controversial. And but through our conversation and our basis where we start from, which that's that mutual respect of each other, we're able to have those conversations, and the policies generally always move forward. One of the biggest issues that we have is Lake Havasu City was a very large community that relied completely on sewer. And we're right at the base of the Colorado River, and other governmental entities wanted us to, we relied on septic tank, and those entities wanted us to move over to sewer. And so at the time, our citizens voted in one of the very largest municipal bonds in the history of a community to put in sewer and sewer infrastructure throughout our entire community. Which meant ripping up roads and putting down infrastructure, putting the roads back, connecting homes and businesses and properties to the sewer system. And it was very costly, to the tune of nearly $400 million. And that debt has to be paid back, certainly. And so rate structures over the years have been very controversial. And not everyone agrees with how it's done or which way. And we're having conversations about that even today. We had conversations last fall, and we'll review it again this fall. But we've been able to make slow and incremental changes that not everyone's happy with, but everyone can live with. And so at the end of the day, probably not a bad outcome. But in our world, our water and wastewater funds are basically nonprofit systems. So those using them, the ratepayers, need to pay the cost of delivering those services. So whatever that looks like at the end of the day, it's not a for-profit system. So if it costs us X number of dollars, we have to charge X number of dollars. But it's just, how do we do that and ensure that all of our citizens are not put in a negative position each month when they have to pay that bill. So we continue to have that conversation. So far, we've been able to navigate it through small incremental changes on both sides of that issue.
What do you think, Mayor? Do you think that there's a difference between politicians and statesmen?
I certainly, for public perception, I do. I think anyone that's elected is immediately politician and part of the problem day one. In just in popular opinion, and that comes from just my viewpoint in talking to other citizens about what that looks like. But not all politicians get things done, and not all politicians serve their constituents or their citizens in an effective way, or even in a way that moves those communities forward. And so I think politician is kind of that overarching, everyone fits into that bucket, but not every politician, again, is effective at what they do or is serving their citizens in a way that's mutually beneficial to the community and the citizens.
And I think that that's something that's really important, because I also think it ties into the concept of, you have individuals that are on one issue or one topic, representatives or candidates, right? And then you do have politicians who manage to get the front page of the newspaper. They manage to be loud. They manage to be able to bring a lot of people out to a council meeting, but they're ineffective. They don't manage to get things done. And we often talk about that, about, oh, well, so-and-so did this, but it's like, at the end of the day, how was the community made better? And so I do think that that's important. What do you think the definition of statesman is?
Yeah, it's interesting because when we're in some pretty unique times right now on what just from a political landscape at the national level, the state level, and in some communities, I will say that I'm very fortunate in Lake Havasu City that we all move in pretty much the same direction at the same time. Certainly, we have different views and different thoughts across the community, but as a whole, we all want to do what's best for Lake Havasu City and its citizens. And when I say that, I mean all of our citizens together, not just elected leaders within the community. So I'm very fortunate that way. But I would say a statesman is somebody that can compromise and can have a conversation with those that they agree with and those that they disagree with. And everyone can walk away feeling heard and understood on where each person is coming from their perspective, but somebody also that can do good policy and good policy for the future of a community. And so, oftentimes we hear folks at the state level or the federal level talk about how many bills they introduced or how many bills they got passed or signed by the executive, whether that be the governor or the president. And to me, I don't know if that's a good metric or something to champion, because every bill that was signed is a new law that we have to deal with as citizens or cities or communities or businesses or whoever's being regulated by that new bill or law once it's signed in by the executive. So I don't know if that's a good champion. I don't know if that's a good benchmark for us to champion the sheer number. Let's talk about policy and what type of outcomes are going to come from that policy versus the number of bills we got across the finish line. Again, that's not something we deal with locally, but we do have to deal with the aftermath of what those laws look like. And we have to implement them in a way that can be very confusing to our citizens, because they expect us to be able to respond or do something based on a nuisance or an issue, and we can't because we don't have the ability to because of a state or federal law.
Yeah, so as you're talking, I'm thinking about like what is it, 13th, what is it, short-term rental conversation,
Yes.
and things. But I'm thinking even about the water conversation and how we manage at this particular point, do not manage water in rural Arizona. And I'm thinking about quality versus quantity. I would like to see, I guess, better policy, better bills, rather than this huge amount. Because like you said, a lot of times those are taking local control away from the municipalities. And then it's up to the local officials to try to figure out how to navigate that and to explain why it is something can't be done.
Yeah, and some of that could just be solved with a conversation. So we can talk about why it is things are done a certain way, and if if there is something that needs to be done at a statewide level or a national level, then so be it. But certainly it can't be to the tune of nearly 2,000 bills or new laws a year being introduced. I haven't talked to one citizen that thinks that they need 2,000 more things to be regulated on them in a year. But
and you know, it's also funny too, when you look at that, a lot of those bills are one issue bills, right? So a lot of the bills that are created are to deal with one issue that often is an isolated issue. But again, like we just said, you can't create one bill for one issue. Whatever bill or whatever law that comes into being is for the overall populace, is for everyone who lives within that jurisdiction. So if it's a one issue bill at the state or at the federal level, you know, if it's something that's created to deal with one issue, it impacts everybody.
exactly.
I think we forget about that. So I have a couple more questions, and I know that we're kind of winding that way, but I do have a couple more questions. I wanted to ask you, and I want to just make sure that I put, I guess, the framework around this question. One of the reasons why I chose for my dissertation work to focus on mayors and vice mayors, and I used them as case studies. I had focus group with them, is because I really feel that at the local level, change is possible, positive change is possible, and sustainability is possible. I feel that at the local level, you know, as a mayor, you have to get 51% of the vote, right? You have to talk to more than just the people that you like. And the people that know you, you have to have more than just them voting for you. As a council member, you know, 1/3 of the vote, I think you can get into council. Depending on the year, we've had council members that were able to be voted in by 54 votes. But as mayor, you have to talk to a broad constituency. You have to have a broad constituency. What do you think about the current movement that is trying to really make the local level, at the local level, we're nonpartisan. We're nonpartisan for a reason, because potholes don't come with parties. Potholes come as a pothole and you need to fix it. Right? What do you think about this sense or this movement? It seems to want to bring partisanship into a nonpartisan realm at the level where really we work with the people.
Yeah, you know, it's very interesting, the conversation and how it goes. I couldn't agree more, though, that there is no party specific pothole, and we just have to deal with it however that looks like. So we are nonpartisan, and it's effective at the local level. That's really where the rubber meets the road. You know, truly, these are the roads that our citizens are driving on, the schools that their children are attending. It's the water that they flush down the toilet. It's the fresh water when they turn on the tap. It's all of those things that matter to your everyday life that we're dealing with. And we're also closest to the people. So we have an understanding. We live that same life. I mean, we go to the same grocery stores, the same doctors. We go to the same parks. We do all of the same things. So we have a good understanding. I'm not supportive of partisan politics at the local level. And that's not to say that we don't already have an undertone of it. We all have our own beliefs, and certainly when a citizen asks, you know, what party I'm registered to, we have a conversation about it. It's not like, oh, I'm nonpartisan here, and I'm just this middle of the road, because I'm not, and it's not the foundation for who I am. So we have the conversation about my party affiliation and what I believe in from a philosophical level. On policy, but when you elect me, you're electing me for the whole me, and so that's leadership, direction, decisiveness, communication, all of those things as the whole of a person, and not just by party affiliation. Although I'm sure some vote for me just because of party affiliation, but I don't advertise that. But if someone asks, I don't hide it. We have to have a conversation about who we are and what we're here to do, and how we're going to be of best service. And that's what makes the American system so great, is because then the citizens are in control and they can elect who best represents them and their decisions at their local level. So I think it's worked nonpartisan. It's the only level that we actually get something done. And no disrespect to my friends at the state or federal level, but it's where we get things done. And so we'll continue to do that. And why change something that's working and working effectively, at least for our community and the other communities that I speak to around the state of Arizona.
So something that you said, though, that I think is absolutely key to what you just said, and I think the way you explained it is just beautiful. I want to just hone in and bring that back up to the surface. You said you're electing me as the whole me. And I think that that right there is something that we often miss as individuals, right? We're electing you. We're electing all of our leaders, or we should be electing our leaders for them in their totality, not because of what they are or what they are not because of this initial or that initial, but again, it's looking at them from the totality of what it is they're expected to do within their role, right? So, within your role, like you said, when people turn on the faucet, they want water. You're not trying to figure out, should clean water go here and not go here? The pothole, should we fix this one first? That's not what we're here to figure out. We're trying to figure out how to run a community, right? And so who has the best, who has the experience? Who has the wisdom, who has the guidance, and who can do that? Again, it's like not just this one issue that we're looking at, but it's the overall community and all of the challenges and quirkiness and everything within it that we're trying to move forward and maintain. So the way you explain that, I think, is absolutely key. And I wish more people would talk about the fact that you're not electing the person because of what initials they may or may not have. You're electing them because their experience and their ability and aptitude to do the job.
Exactly. And it's so important. If when we're vetting candidates, and this is candidates that are running for all offices that are elected, and this is for citizens, this is for elected leaders, this is for anyone, ask the questions that matter. Sometimes we don't ask the questions because we're afraid that they might not like it, they might not respond, or some of the federal and state folks are they're celebrity like, where we see them on TV, and so how could I dare ask them what they think about water and what they're going to do from a policy standpoint for water futures for Lake Havasu City or for the state of Arizona? But those are the questions we have to ask, and don't be afraid to ask them. All elected leaders, myself included, work for the citizens in which they're elected to serve. And so there's no way we can do that without asking the tough questions and never be bashful. Ask again, from the mutual respect viewpoint, but ask the questions, and you'll be able to find the best people that are available to lead you in the way that you feel is most appropriate when you're at the ballot box.
And I think it's asking the question, but it's also listening to it, right? One of the things that I found interesting is that sometimes we ask a super complicated question, like, why is it that we don't have certain water rights in Arizona? That's the only thing I think of is water. Water is not a 140 character answer. Right? It is not a short sound bite, because we like to make up sound bites and they sound great. But if you're going to ask a question, you should also then allow for the time it takes to respond to it, because some people will pop off with the sound bite, but then someone else might actually answer your question, but it might take them 3 to 5 minutes instead of 30 seconds. So I think that that's important, that we not only ask the questions, but we also listen to the answer.
No, yeah, great point. Because especially just using water. It's so complicated with water and the regulations on the Colorado River and the law of the river and all of these things, that if to really understand it, you do need some time, and you want to hopefully elect somebody that does understand it, because it is so complicated and so important for the future of our communities.
So I have one major last question, and then I have one question that I'm going to ask for you to leave our viewers with, Mayor. But what do you think about empathy And does empathy play a role into the concept of a statesman?
Certainly, yeah. Empathy is so important. If you can truly put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand why that particular issue or comment or policy is of concern or is an issue for a citizen, uh, you're going to be a better servant to that person of information, of policy, of what's going to make your community a stronger community. So I do think empathy is important, and I think empathy is probably could be that defining point that separates a politician from a statesman. To kind of come full circle to the question earlier, because once you can put yourself in their shoes, you have a different level of understanding and appreciation for the comment or the thoughts or at least the pathway. Again, you don't have to agree with it, but you at least understand it. And when you understand that, you're able to take that perspective into account when you're making a decision or as you're moving forward.
Do you think that statesmen are born statesmen, or do you think that statesmen, do you think an individual can grow into statesmanship?
I do. Yeah, I think I don't think anyone's predisposed to anything, and I think that you certainly could grow into it as you have more experiences, and it probably does come easier to others. Certain people might be very easy to have those traits and attributes, and it might be more difficult for others. Just like learning science and math is easy for some, and English and literature is easy for others. And so, but I do still think that everybody can grow into that and become a better and stronger leader, and also have more skills and attributes that allow them to be a statesman in their service to their community.
So, as we wind down to this last question that I have for you, Mayor Sheehy, I just want to tell you that I'm so appreciative of the fact that you came on the Mayor's Community Policy Trust to have this conversation. I do think that it's a conversation that is somewhat difficult, but it's a conversation that we need to have. I think I know as we move forward as cities and towns, as our state, as in the nation, we really need to have leadership that is reflective of the individuals, is knowledgeable, can say no when it's appropriate, can say yes when it's appropriate, but really seeks to be statesmen and to really put the message out there that we can disagree in a respectful manner. We do not have to agree, but if we just take time to have basic respect for one another, we should be able then and build the relationships, right? We should be able then to have the difficult conversations that we're going to need to have moving forward. We have this issue with water, we have an issue with housing, and our small businesses, and all these are conversations that bring up fear, right? And because you're talking about people's livelihood and what we're going to do, and just really being respectful is important.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. We're going to have really difficult conversations especially when it comes to as you said, water, housing, and what that looks like. The jobs of the future. What does that look like? But we can do that, and we just have to do that, and not shy away from the difficult conversations. But I do have confidence that we'll be able to do that as a state. And we'll be in a position that's going to allow us to do what's best for our entire communities within our state. It's not going to be easy, but we can do it. And I know the folks I've met with are up for the challenge, and I've been seeing and hearing more people starting the conversations and having those conversations throughout the state, which is so important. And that wasn't something that you saw even 4 years ago. So we're making progress, and we're doing it in a quick fashion.
Well, I absolutely love Lake Havasu City, and I've had the opportunity to have served alongside of you as mayor, and now get in a more supporting role. And I would say that I absolutely admire your leadership in your city, and I think you're an incredible mayor. And I'm going to leave you with the last word of how do you think we should go out and promote statesmanship amongst ourselves and amongst our colleagues?
Yeah, great question. Well, first, thank you so much for having me, and it's been a great conversation. I'm glad to be a part of it, and your efforts in this area. And I think just having the conversation, before today, I never really gave it much thought about am I a politician? Am I a statesman? Am I a mayor? I'm just here to serve, and in what way can I serve in the best way that's going to be good for our community and good for the citizens of Lake Havasu City. So I think just having the conversation certainly has allowed me to think bigger and what that scope looks like. And so I think the more conversations that you have, and certainly now you've wrapped me into it, so now that I'll have, and the others that you've wrapped in, and we will just multiply by having those conversations with elected officials throughout our circle of influence, if you will, about what that means. And it's a very interesting topic that I didn't really have much thought coming into it, other than that's what we would be talking about.
Well, again, I appreciate your time today, Mayor. I hope to see you soon in your, I guess, neck of the woods, or your shoreline, maybe I should say it that way. Again, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.